Greetings, companies, exporters, trade and business experts. Welcome. Welcome to all of you to today's webinar on e-commerce in a COVID-19 age. We're delighted that you could all be here today. We appreciate you taking the time to log on and join us as we look at some of the challenges and potential responses that we've and share our experiences of this new business environment that's unfolding around us. Now, just while the last registrants are logging on, I'm going to do some quick little housekeeping just to make sure you're all here. Though this is part of our Go Global webinar series. We've been doing this for several years now. You can look back at our catalog and see which are of interest to you. We are also hosting a series of webinars coming up, many of them focused on sharing experiences and know-how in with COVID-19 challenges. You can see that at our website, which is IBT Online. Today's webinar will be about just under an hour. We're going to get you back to your desks or your homes or your home offices within an hour. We will have 3 polls, and we'd appreciate if you'd all participate in the polls. And we would love to have your questions and feedback. So pop us a note into the chat box, and we have someone curating questions, and we'll gather up questions for a live Q&A at the end of it. And we, love any response that you have. So without further ado, let's also just introduce ourselves. So my name is Susanna Hardy, and I am Chief Content Officer at IBT Online. I'm delighted to be here today. My background is in finance, but I've increasingly been drawn to the wonders of online content and the impact it can have. That's my role. And as I said, I'm delighted also to be joined by 2 of my great colleagues, Samantha Safici and Jeff Artis, both of them terrific professionals who have a deep understanding and experience in helping businesses grow using online tools. Both Samantha and Jeff are based in the US and are always easy to reach and share their knowledge and experience with companies. Now, a very quick word on who we are as a company. IBT Online stands for International Business and Technology Online, and we're a US company, a private company, and we are 100% focused on online tools for our clients and using online tools to help them grow their businesses. So essentially these fall under 2 categories, websites and online marketing. And perhaps our greatest unique selling point is that we work, think, and act globally, and have done since our creation in 2002. We're also very privileged and delighted to be partners with some terrific people in the US. Getting straight back onto our today's agenda, we decided to split today into 5 key areas. So starting off, we're talking about sort of the buyer's journey and where that and how that's been affected in a COVID-19 age, and where we are today, and what that means for you as companies looking out there to see how you can engage with your prospective buyers and what they're doing in today's world. Then we want to go sort of a big broad brush landscape of the global e-commerce, and especially that international part of the e-commerce. We're going to drill down then into some of the choices you have and some of the tools, either websites or marketing, that you have at your disposal. And finally round up with a few sort of takeaways, hopefully helpful resources for you and any of your questions that you have. So without further ado, let's talk first about the buyer's journey in the current circumstances in this COVID-19 age. Just skipping back a second and looking at basics. Before we talk about the buyer's journey, we also have to understand what a buyer persona is. And I know that for many of you who are marketing and sales experts, you know exactly who this is. But let me just step back for a second, bear with me. A buyer persona is what it sounds like. It is a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer. And you base that representation on market research, but also on real data about your existing customers. And so you're defining that buyer persona in order to make sure that you're absolutely on track, that you're at the right time with the right message. And there's rarely been such a critical time as now to make sure that you're on the right track with the right message. You know, resources are scarce. Make sure that everything counts at the moment. So the one thing you've got to do first of all is define your buyer persona for each market, for each international market that you're aiming for, and also for each vertical. Remember that many of you will have several verticals. You might be supplying to several different types of industries. There may well be differences. I just love this example here of a buyer persona and Zipcar, because they actually put their buyer persona in their mission statement. You know, their mission statement of Zipcar is to serve urban dwelling, educated, techno-savvy customers who worry about the environment. So that is their buyer persona. You know, it's environmentally conscious, tech-savvy, educated, and urban. So that's an example of a buyer persona. Once you have identified that, and as I said, very often you will have different personas for different markets, and we'll come back to that, and you'll have several buyer personas in markets, especially, and this counts especially for e-commerce. So once you've identified those buyer personas, you then need to look at your buyer's journey. And really, again, for many of you who are very involved in sales and marketing, this will be a familiar sort of flywheel to you about engaging, attracting, engaging, and delighting your customers in order to propel growth. So from strangers who come upon your website, you then get found by that website. You start to reach out on that website, and through social media, those strangers become prospects. Again, through that journey of engagement with them, through social media, through your website, they understand you, they begin to trust you enough to become a customer. You then have such terrific customer products and customer service that they're absolutely delighted and promote you. So you get found, you're understood, and you do business. That is essentially a buyer's journey, and that's what we'll be talking about. What's really important in the COVID-19 age is to make sure that you're totally aware that not just you, but everybody around the world is basically shifting their priorities. And their priorities, what we hear again and again from our clients and talking with companies, a wide spectrum of companies across the globe, we hear 4 consistent priorities today, which are affecting the buyer's journey. Everybody's looking after employees, which means an estimated 2 billion people are working from home. So, you know, and what that means for your buyer, who's probably looking after their kids at the same time. Next thing is people's business is so disrupted, everybody is looking at costs, how to manage costs, and also cash flow. The third priority is to maintain existing partnerships. And what about your supply chains and who's doing what in the business? All these sort of networks and links. And the fourth, last but certainly not least, survive to thrive. You know, how are you going to generate any sales? Where's the business prospects going? Where are your exports? Where's your international business? So in what way is this affecting your buyer's journey? For us, again and again, what we see is that it is reinforcing the online route. And those of you who have kids who have downloaded Zoom and who have crashed their computers because they're, you know, the online is now affecting every aspect of your business because we're all hunkered down with this. It's affected, therefore, your buyer persona and their journey. It's also reinforced that online route and therefore the need to be absolutely on point on e-commerce with your website and with your online marketing. So the questions to ask is, how are your buyer personas finding you now? Are they finding you in different ways? In what way has that journey differ across different markets today? And what new online tools are your buyer personas using in their journey? So let's take a quick look also about what it means to be online. Now, this is the most recent reliable data that we have about overview of a global internet use. It was published by Hootsuite, thank them very much, in January 2020. 4.5 billion people, that's nearly 60% of the world, online. That number, I don't have numbers for April, Hootsuite's working on it, but the anecdotal evidence that I have from We Are Social, Hootsuite, and other sources is that that has climbed by over 400 million people in the last month. What's also changed is the number of hours spent. So as of last year, as of December 2019 or January 2020, the average person on the internet spent nearly 7 hours a day on the internet. Again, we don't yet have the numbers. It's all still out there. It's very rough, anecdotal. Well, nearly 9.5 hours on the internet today. So you can see that it has really reinforced this massive online presence, and in a sense, that's good. At least you know that your prospects, your customers, your suppliers, your employees are all online. What are they doing? Well, one of the main things they're doing is they're communicating and using social media. Again, these numbers date from the end of 2019, published in January 2020, at which point 49% of the total population of the world was online using social media. 3.8 billion people. Again, indications are that that is well over 4.5 billion today. That has jumped up to 600 million people in the last 2 months. Again, these are anecdotal, but it's just to reinforce this notion of using online tools for your business now. So I guess my last slide, just about this sort of introduction piece of our webinar today, which is about the buyer's journey in a COVID-19 era, is that COVID-19 is a global issue. It's also a ubiquitous issue. It is affecting every aspect of everybody's business, everywhere. And the global impact, it means it has to have global solutions. One of the key things we will argue in this webinar is that to diversify your customer base, to spread your geographical and vertical risk, means having greater stability in your business model and lowering your overall business risk going forward. E-commerce, online marketing, localized websites are all terrific ways of achieving this, of reaching beyond your border, regardless of supply chains. I'd like to end on a slightly happier note as well. This is a time, the COVID-19 will end. We will find solutions. Already now there's some good news coming in. Finland is going back to school. Italy, the seems to be getting back. Wuhan province is now open again for business. Some of the indications we're having on major impact industries like the aviation industry, is that it is actually, there are pockets of strong recovery coming through. It's important to be prepared for that rebound because it will be different from the before and after COVID-19. So make sure that you're prepared for it using online tools. I'm going to pass now to Jeff and talk about global e-commerce landscape. Jeff?
Sure. Thank you, Susanna. Very pleased to welcome everyone today. Thanks for joining us. So we've talked about the astonishing growth of internet usage generally, and as you'd expect, how many more people have been communicating in recent weeks. Susanna talked about the buyer persona, figuring out who wants to buy what you're selling and how to communicate with them in this unusual environment. E-commerce just keeps growing in popularity. It's an integral part of all of our lives, and I want to try to give you a sense for where the size and the value is of this online marketplace, and some interesting growth trends, and where the biggest opportunities are. First things first, you have to get a sense for how big the B2C e-commerce market really is. $3.5 trillion globally. A third of that is cross-border, and we'll get to that shortly. So what that means is, of a world population of about 7.5 billion, 4.5 billion people are online, and 3.5 billion of us are shopping online. So about 45% of people are actually buying things online. You would already know that the US is a huge e-commerce market. You can see here greater than $500 billion. And it won't surprise you to see that China is the powerhouse, much bigger, with about a $740 billion e-commerce market as of the end of 2019. If you add up the numbers, Europe is also pretty large. If you take it as an entire region, it's about the same size as the US. We're still getting data in on the effects that COVID-19 is having on e-commerce, but everybody agrees it's skyrocketed for most sectors. A big impact for online groceries and big generalists. Amazon already accounts for $4 of about every $10 of global e-commerce, but they continue to gain share and are looking to hire 100,000 new staff now to support their recent growth. Here is an interesting snapshot of e-commerce adoption worldwide. So an average of about 74% of internet users say that they bought something online in the past month. So pretty high percentage of commerce among people who are spending time on the internet. What I find interesting here is that some of the countries that do more online shopping than this average, where you might perceive that there's less disposable income, or that more of the internet usage is just for basic information gathering, countries like Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines, but e-commerce really is happening everywhere that there is internet usage. Here are some interesting statistics and some growth projections for e-commerce participation by country over a longer time span, so all the way through 2023. The numbers jump out right away, that the size and the scope and the scale of the global e-commerce opportunity for your products are just enormous. We mentioned already that China remains the dominant player, but what's really striking is the double-digit growth for all of these countries. Not just double digits, but really strong, 20 to 40%, even in what you'd think of as a mature e-commerce market like Australia or the United States or the United Kingdom. Be sure to keep an eye on some surprising growth markets for e-commerce for American companies, like Canada, which is the favorite trading partner of so many American companies, and even Russia, with a lot of e-commerce opportunity if you do it the right way. So I know that the reason we're all here, what we're all interested in, is to have a look at the international portion of this. So much, as I mentioned earlier, much of this global e-commerce growth is fueled by cross-border international e-commerce transactions. Interesting, e-commerce sales will actually outpace brick and mortar growth by a 3-to-1 margin, and the volume and the value of this make it clear that if you want to grow the export markets that you're in and you enter new ones, you really have to be in a position to market and sell online. When you start thinking about an e-commerce strategy, it's important to know where the biggest opportunities are. You'll get to see this deck. We'll share this with you afterwards, but here are some statistics on the number of people in various countries who are shopping online and the percentage of those transactions that are made internationally. So the US, as you'd expect, a huge e-commerce transactional market, 205 million shoppers, but only a third of us ever look to shop internationally. It's much higher in some other countries. Canada, 67%. They have a very big appetite for American products. Look at a small country like Israel, 4 million shoppers, but 82% buy internationally. If we were talking about a tiny country like Luxembourg, it'd probably be 95 or 100%. Germany, 23% looking outside the country to buy. That's a very prosperous country with a lot of spending power. Even in countries like Japan, which is typically a pretty closed market because of language and culture, 14% of online shoppers are looking outside the country to buy. And Brazil, like the rest of Latin America, where there are usually pretty high tariffs and pretty high barriers to importing, 40% of online shoppers looking to buy overseas. So think about some of these opportunities and differences when deciding where you might want to sell your goods and services. Quick look at some e-commerce activities also tell a story. 80% of internet browsers have gone looking or have gone searching, let's say, for something to buy. That's why search engine optimization is so critical for your website. 52% of internet users have made a purchase on a mobile device. That's why it's really important to have an e-commerce site that is mobile friendly. Samantha is going to talk about a couple of these strategies coming up. But wherever it is that you're selling, that means that the user experience, that local user experience that we talk about on your site and on your storefront, needs to be a priority no matter what platform you're using. And we'll talk about the choices and the pros and cons of platforms shortly. Also important to realize that it's the value of nurturing repeat customers. These are not one-of activities. 75% of online shoppers say that they buy something at least once a month. So finally, before I hand over to the next section, I want to emphasize the importance of e-commerce for businesses selling to other businesses. B2B companies ignore these trends at their own peril. This is a pretty simple graphic, but it's pretty impactful. Suffice to say that the B2B e-commerce market, although the statistics aren't as easy to track, is estimated to be about 3 times the B2C market. That's what most people think of for e-commerce, as someone sitting at their kitchen table ordering something from an online shopping portal. But the B2B opportunity is really huge. And what you need to remember is that whether it's a B2B or a B2C transaction, you're still communicating, engaging with a person. So even if your business model is different, remember that according to a Gartner study, nearly all of B2B purchases, 94%, are researched online before contacting a sales rep. So even if your product or service is very customized, if it has a high price point, if you take a consultative sales approach and don't really expect people to click and buy online, your website has to be compelling enough to encourage the call to action and convince that customer to request a contact. By the way, something else I'll leave you with. We mentioned earlier that the U.S. is the second largest retail e-commerce market, but in B2B, Asia really dominates here. North America and Europe are about 16% of B2B online sales. The vast majority is in Asia, China, Japan, and South Korea. So whether you're selling a product or a service through a B2C or a B2B transaction, choosing the right e-commerce portal and the influence of your website development on that and strategic online marketing are really critical. I believe Samantha Safici is going to talk through the options available for e-commerce and their pros and cons, but I think Susanna wants to do something first.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, I do. I'd like to launch our first poll. First of all, thank you also, Jeff, for a great overview of this vast subject. Quick poll, please answer. What are your target international markets for 2020, 2021? These might have been thrown out of kilter because of COVID-19, but we'd love to have some of your response here. It's actually really interesting. I can give you some quick overview. I would say you are clustering very much around, well, I'd say Europe and Latin America are the two pulling ahead, and with Asia coming quick behind it. not many of you are looking at other, I have to say that too. But thank you so much. Very interesting. This helps us also design our webinars and look through things for that might interest you, so that we know which markets to focus on for future learning experiences. Let's talk now about the options that you have as exporters. Where, what kind of options are you looking at when you're looking at international e-commerce options? Typically, we identify 4 different e-commerce options, and I'll go through them quickly. They basically are either generalist marketplaces. Think of the Amazons of the world. The next would be specialist marketplaces, in-market distributors, people like that. And again, I'll give some examples. You could say, no, I'm going to go DIY, I'll do my own. Or you could have a combination of many of those. Let's go through just very quickly before we drill down into strategies for them. But in terms of generalist marketplaces, these are very much dominated by these huge global leaders: Amazon, Alibaba, eBay, Rakuten for Japan. So those are the very large ones that are global. And then you have regional leaders as well. The German companies, Zalando, for example, which is really now all across Europe, or Mercado Libre, if you want to target Latin America. So these are fantastic platforms that are very much global platforms. If we're looking at specialist marketplaces or in-market distributors, I'd say there's 2 types. There's either your own distributor, and they can be dedicated or they can be a multi-distributor. For example, the example on the left there, ELF is a distributor of electric products. And you could have a dedicated distributor for a marketplace, or else you can have a very specialist portal or marketplace. And the example I've given there is one for the aviation industry, a company called PartSpace, which has an online portal, online marketplace for buying and selling aviation products. So that's a different type. Again, it's a very specialized vertical rather than the big generalist. I'd say both these specialist marketplaces and the generalist marketplaces have a lot of advantages. They're easy. They're really easy. They're quick to set up. You don't have to invest a lot. And very often they will look after everything for you. They'll look after fulfillment, logistics, everything. They'll even offer Alibaba Pay, for example, payment solutions. There's a couple of really significant disadvantages that you do have to be aware of for the longer term. And it's really important to understand what those mean for your business long-term development, especially in a time of COVID-19, when your brand and reputation is going to be absolutely key for your long-term success. The problem with those generalist and specialist marketplaces is that they don't develop your brand. You develop the marketplace's brand. So people go on Amazon, they don't go on your website, or they go on a portal and then they buy and sell a product. They don't think of you as a company, they think of the portal, the marketplace. And that can lead to problems in the longer term with pricing as well. And it can be also conflicts of interest. Remember also that many of those marketplaces have ongoing commissions and fees, and there can be a lot of other costs which suddenly come up. I'm going to give you a quick example of Alibaba, for example, which is terrific. But if you're looking for certain types of B2B or B2C platforms, Alibaba does have a lot of solutions. But there's actually quite a lot of cost in there too. Not least of which you got to put QR codes everywhere. Their annual fees and commissions, and for Alibaba, for example, it's exclusive. The pay-per-click is exclusive to Alibaba. So these are things to think about as you go forward. So they do, generalist marketplaces and specialist marketplaces serve a purpose. They serve definitely a purpose for a new market entry or for someone you're testing out a market. But longer term, you also need to think about having your own online presence. And there's no better time than do that now, when customers are looking very carefully at their suppliers and at who they trust in business. So one other option is to have your own global e-commerce platform. It's not easy, but at least you control everything. And you can, a lot of you already have e-commerce enabled websites for the US, so you can build out and build on that market after market. We do a lot of that for companies, building on, what are the next likely markets to add. There's a couple of what I've called non-negotiables. They're on the left. And they're obvious for anyone on e-commerce. As Jeff said earlier, it has to be mobile responsive design. You've got to have a very much conversion-oriented user experience so that people actually fill out and go to their baskets and click the yes, I'll buy it basket. And again, that's for B2C, but the same applies for B2B. The one thing I wanted to emphasize here as well is that there's a lot of logistic groups, like DHL, for example, who offer really competitive, great solutions. They, not just for shipping, but they'll help you with customs, with tariffs, with taxes, with VAT payments, with your whole returns policy. So borders, international borders, are no longer really the excuse to say, oh no, I can't do it because it's got tariffs and things like that. No, you can find companies like, as I said, DHL, for example, that can help you with all those aspects of the work. The last one that I want to emphasize, though, is what we would call an omni-channel, which is really, and that's going for your US website or your domestic website. Sorry, I keep saying US, for your domestic website, and then building that out internationally. And you can use, once you have those websites, those international localized websites, you can then use those as springboards into either a generalist or a specialist or your own e-commerce platform. You have the choice, and you can do any one of those three in any market that you choose. Also, if you have your own localized website in a marketplace, then you can feed into an Amazon or into a Partspace or an in-market distributor, specialist marketplace, but you're still developing your own brand in tandem with it. So it mitigates a lot of the disadvantages we've seen before in those other options. Now, let's look at some of the tools you need for that successful e-commerce experience. Before we do that, I'm going to launch another poll. Please, would you like more information on international e-commerce solutions? Is this something you want us to drill down into much more? Would you like, yes, please, yes, right away, no, soon, not at the moment, whichever. Interesting, most of you have already replied. Thank you very much indeed for those replies. I have to say, it looks like we're going to be terrifically busy in the next, over the next, between now and the next month. Thank you so much for those replies. And good to see that many of you are looking for further information. It's lovely. So successful international e-commerce. I think what we'd like to stress here is basically you've got two tools to do this. You've got what we've called an e-commerce enabled localized website. These are so a strong website in the local market, which is fit for purpose for e-commerce. And you've got your means of communication as well, of interactive communication, international online marketing, whether that's search engine marketing, social media marketing, let's call it SEM or SEM, social media marketing or SMM, all those different types of international online marketing that you can use for your buyer's journey and to engage with your buyer personas in these different markets. And then as that an e-commerce enabled localized website. Just for those of you who are new to our webinars, I'm going to share this slide. I know that many of you already know this one. I tried to summarize on one slide what is a localized website. And a localized website does not mean just sticking an extra page on your on your domestic website. It means that you have a customer-centric localized website so that it is totally optimized for the local search engine. So here are the 10 criteria that I would list to define a localized website. Note things like you're hosting in an optimal way. So if you're trying to reach someone in Japan, you're hosting in Japan or nearby. You're not hosting in your headquarters in Arkansas, for example. Let me explain a little bit more about localized website. And I'm just going to take the example of how a search engine works. Google is the world leader in search engine, but there are many others. Yandex, Baidu, and even social media channels and things like YouTube are search engines. People search for things via YouTube, via Facebook, via LinkedIn, whatever. So those are types of search engines. But let's look at Google because they all share this one thing. They are all customer searcher centric. So if I'm sitting in Argentina, I will go on to Google Argentina. I'm not going to go on to google.com because that's what Google shows me in Argentina. And it's in Spanish and it's in Argentinian Spanish. And Google ranks and sorts the website, my searches according to my preferences, my being in Argentina. So whatever is most relevant for me in Argentina is going to be what Google puts on their front page. So don't think of Google as a global company. Think of it as lots of different companies. Google UK is very different from Google US, but they're both the same language. But nonetheless, the searches you'll get from that one language saying Google is different. So Samantha, who has a bit of a shoe fetish, put in red shoes, google.com. I quite like shoes too. I'm in the UK. So google.co.uk, put in red shoes. I get very different things from Samantha. This is something completely basic like red shoes. So just imagine when you're thinking of your B2B products, Google will define and rank you according to the local searcher. One of the key things to make sure that you're aware of is keywords and how they affect and operate in different markets. Here's an example of the word train in Portuguese used in Brazil and Portugal. And if you're in Portugal, you would use the word comboio. And if you're in Brazil, it's trem. So if you're not using the right words, again, you're not going to be found. And this has to do with search engine optimization and localization for your website. If your e-commerce website is not localized and optimized, you won't be found. You're invisible. One of the main questions we get from our clients is, okay, I've understood this now. Which market should I prioritize? Where should I go first? And one of the things we say to them is, well, if you want to prioritize your markets, there's lots of different ways of looking at it. One of the main ways we can do to look at it is to say, okay, we could say, look, your markets are where are the most potential? Where do you think it'll have the most dramatic effect? Is there a distributor? Is there a warehouse somewhere that you want to leverage? So those are all things that we can look at. But one of the things you could also look at, and we also look at, is to do sort of a Google Analytics or your website analytics. So looking at our own website, for example, if we take this over a month, you'd look at this and say, okay, in 1 month's time, and over the course of 1 month, just take a random month, we'll have had, 68% of our visitors last month came from the USA. 7% came from Mexico. So 68% out of the, so 31% out of the 277,000 visitors, that leaves you with 87,500 international website visits last month. Okay, that's right. That's our international market just from our website. Now, if we assume a 2% conversion rate, that gives us something like 1,750 orders a month. What's the price of my product? Well, I've taken a random figure of $500 per unit, which I understand from many of you, especially if you're in the B2B world, you'll look at that and go, that is small. But anyway, it'll give you an estimated, if you annualize it, $10.5 million of sales. So that's your estimated annualized potential looking out. So that's one way that you can look at saying, which priority markets should I have? Should I go to international or not? Is it worth it to have international websites? In this case, I would suggest it is. When I look at localized social media, I think, Samantha, is this one for you, or should I go on?
Yep, this one's for me. I'll be happy to take it from here.
Take it from here.
Excellent, thank you. So let's take a look at social media marketing. First, it's important to note that out of the 4.5 billion active internet users on the planet, 3.5 billion are on social media. So social media is a terrific way to reach out to target audiences internationally, because people all over the world are logging on, talking to each other, interacting with brands, and learning about products that they want to buy, especially right now during this COVID-19 age. So, for example, in the Middle East, nearly 40% of consumers are using social media to buy goods. So if you're a company looking to engage with prospects in the Middle East, it makes a whole lot of sense if you have a social media campaign to get the word out. On this slide, I also have an example of a social media marketing campaign that we're running for one of our clients. In this case, for the Mexican market. The objectives are to first drive mid-funnel traffic to the blog that they have up and running, and also to boost the keyword organic searches. And you can see that by our post right there to the right. Which actually brings me to the next slide, describing a few best practices for online marketing, both domestically and internationally. So the first two checks we've already reviewed with Susanna in the beginning of this webinar, but for our purposes, I just want to really stress the importance of understanding who your buyer personas are in each market and each vertical, as well as what their journey looks like. Remember, the more specific, the better, and that is something that can change pretty regularly, so you have to really keep up with it. One thing to include in that research is the specific social media platforms that they're on. So there are a ton of platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok is a new one, YouTube, LinkedIn, and their usage varies from country to country, industry to industry. So you have to make sure to do your research so you don't waste your really precious time, energy, resources outreaching to the incorrect audience. And once that's done, you need to be really clear about what your objectives are. I'll get a little bit into this more on the next slide because it is just so vital. And then the last part is to map out your campaign. Make sure that the content and the platforms you choose make sense for your buyer personas and the specific countries. And this is how online marketing typically works. However, remember that COVID-19 might have forced some changes. So some campaigns that were planned for this month might seem kind of irrelevant or insensitive right now. So don't hesitate to edit your campaigns so that the content you're putting out there is timely, relevant, and helpful for your buyer personas. But remember, don't try to capitalize on COVID-19. You can continue to market your products, just be really sensitive with your messaging and kind of add that layer of empathy to all of your posts that you're putting out there. So in the next slide, just real quick on objectives. We think that they're so important that we decided to dedicate a complete slide to it. So when designing your marketing strategy, it's really important to be aligned with your overall business strategy. This will give you the starting point to decide what you want to achieve, and then consequently how you're going to monitor this or what metrics you should really focus on. So if we take social media here for an example, and you can see how a singular platform, in this case we can use Facebook for example, you can really tailor your activities and your goals to the overall objectives of your business. And depending on what you are selling or what service you're providing, it might be a time to switch business objectives to fit with what your buyer persona needs right now. So for example, if your product or service isn't really selling because of COVID-19 and the effects that it's having, maybe you should focus on growing your brand, which means your social media goals should be driven to make new and existing customers aware of your company, staying front of mind. which means you should be looking at kind of like those vanity metrics, like followers, shares, and even a little bit kind of comments and likes. This brings me to what your online presence should be focusing on at this time. So taking a look at that first half of the semicircle, so your website, your e-commerce platform, your clients need to maintain some presence because it's very hard to regain that lost market share. So here are a few things that you can do. You can add text to or a page, for example, to your website telling your customers how they can do business with you at this time. Maybe you can add a new call to action if you're selling a product or service that will specifically help people at this time. Or maybe you're focusing on brand awareness and growing the brand, so reviewing your SEO and keywords can be your main action item for your websites. What you do with your website will vary company to company, but make sure to do something so that you don't fall off the radar. That is the main point of this slide. And then looking at the second half of the semicircle. So in terms of marketing, it goes hand in hand with what you do with your website. The main thing is to review, and then adapt. Really step into the shoes of your buyer personas and understand what you can do to best serve them at this time. That way you can maintain momentum, you can avoid disappearing from the radar, and be really ready for the rebound. Just keep at it, because once it's gone, and it's really, really difficult to get back.
Samantha, thank you very much indeed. We don't want to end on a negative tone about that, but these are difficult times. Before we look at some of the action items as well and some summaries, this is my last poll that I would like you to please respond to. Would anyone like more information on localized websites, international online marketing? Are you interested in getting research from us? Are you interested in getting more information from us? Please let us know. And I think it sounds very similar to the last one. I think we're going to be pretty busy in the next few weeks, so I'm very pleased about and very happy about. Thank you very much. But we're always happy to share our experiences and help wherever we can. And I think one of the keys for this whole COVID thing is actually sharing good information and figuring out what works in one place, seeing if it can't work in another place. Thank you all very much for responding to that. And we'll be in touch in due course. Now let's talk about some action items. Hold on, here we go. Action items, takeaways, so on. So first of all, just resuming. Our point is that both social media and websites must be localized. They must be customer-centric in order to be valid in today's world. And your international e-commerce success will be all about choosing the right kind of e-commerce model for you, whether it's omni-channel, whether you're at the stage of saying, well, I want one website and a dedicated portal, specialist portal, or no, I'm going to go for the generalist marketplace and a website, whatever that e-commerce model is. Make sure that your resources are honed directly to what you best fits your business model. Use localized websites, localized online marketing to be found, be understood, therefore be trusted enough to have the buyer's journey and the buyer persona actually do business with you. And then finally, I think as we've said throughout, know your buyer persona, know their international buyer's journey on the e-commerce world that you're targeting. And again, we can help you if you're looking to have more information about what that international buyer's journey might look like. We have a lot of experience in a lot of different markets, and we give that and share that experience. We give that information very willingly. The next thing we wanted to really conclude with was during the COVID-19 time, it's really important, obviously, to focus on essentials. And for us, what are those essentials? If we have to summarize what those essentials are in e-commerce, it's making sure that your customers find you easily and can do business with you really easily. Whether that means reaching out to some service providers like logistics companies to help you with things, or ourselves to help you with your websites, your online marketing. Make sure that your customers know that you're open for business, that your online marketing is working hard for you for lead generation, and to make sure that and engage with existing customers to weather this storm. And not to end on a bad note, this storm will pass. We will be a different world once after, post COVID-19. But we will still be an engaged world that does business. It will be, I believe, a much more online world. All those things we've been talking about for the last few years about online tools and working distance and so on, I think they will be much more present than in the past. In terms of timing, who knows? But we already see a lot of, we hear this again and again. Watch Asia carefully, not just China. Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea are fascinating markets to watch at the moment. They are recovering fast. Our clients are getting orders in from those areas now. What shape is that rebound going to happen? Again, our suggestion is watch Asia. We're at the moment, it shows a clear vertical up from the depths. We'll have to watch that carefully. It may well be a seesaw, which is something that nobody wants to see. But at the moment, there's no indication of that. It'll also be very much shaped by what government's responses are across the global world. From a business perspective, from you, your company, from us, as a private company, the most important part for us is to prepare for the rebound. Make sure you're there, because if you're not there when things do rebound, it's hard to get that back. It's hard to regain that market share once you lose it. So prepare for the rebound now. Don't cut revenue just to cut costs. See what works best for you. Helpful resources. There's an absolutely huge amount of helpful resources. Some of the ones that we would recommend, particularly as we looked at the registrants for this webinar, a lot of you are from the US. Exim Bank is a terrific one. If you're looking at insurance for international business, don't forget your local economic development agency. Get your US website, get your US map, figure out which is your economic development state and contact them. One of the keys that we want you to take away as well is to make sure that you look and learn and share helpful information. Here's a quick overview of some of the things that we found have been really interesting from our clients. I'm whipping through this quickly because I do want to have some time for questions. But one of the things I wanted to point out was, again, some of the markets already recovering. Some of the comments as well. Social media is having more impact and is more impactful than before COVID-19. We're hearing that from a lot of our clients. Recommendations: analyze your cost centers. Choose the right channels for your business model. Make sure that online marketing ensures that your global digital footprint does not disappear or shrink. Look at the data, find opportunities for growth. There are opportunities for growth. E-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, websites, online marketing are great tools to find those and use and exploit those opportunities for growth. Finally, be adaptable, be flexible, be innovative. I've left a little bit of time for questions. Before we do that, we just wish you all well, stay well, look after yourselves, look after those your loved ones, look after your communities, your companies, and your communities. So now, time for questions, and there's a lot of them. Know that we will reach out to you individually as well if we don't have time to answer everything today. Samantha, a quick question to you. How do I choose which social media platform to market and to use in every international country? Now, there's a huge question for you, Samantha.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have a specific answer because it really depends and it varies from company to company and from country to country. What you should do is You should really research what platforms your buyer persona is on, and there's a ton of resources out there that you can do that. Or you can partner up with a company or agency that specializes in international online marketing, like IBT, and we would be able to really help identify where your customers are and how you can reach them through social media.
Terrific. Jeff, here's one for you. It's a little bit tricky, but Jeff, we do e-commerce, and I normally go to trade shows to visit my distributors, and my warehouse platforms. What can I do now? Jeff?
Yes. Well, localized websites, most people would think of as being for the benefit of customers, but they're also very good tools for distributors. The desire to sit with them face to face, I think, is never going to go away, and that will come back. But it's great to be able to give them a tool to have conversations with buyers in those overseas markets, in those countries, to get them comfortable with your value proposition, to give your distributors a tool to sell your products better. That's something you can definitely do with an enhanced online presence.
Thanks, Jeff. Samantha, there's a lot of questions about resourcing, like not outsourcing, but resourcing. I guess that also fits a lot of the supply chains. And a lot of the questions are about how can I use a website, or how can I use e-commerce for resourcing? Any ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you know a specific country that you want to resource to, what we can do is we can create a localized online presence, and we can put a page there, for example, that says we're looking for a manufacturer that creates or that manufactures these parts, and we can do the same thing for finding distributors and partners, so that those manufacturers can, through search engine optimization and through keyword research, they can actually find that page and get in contact with you. So yeah, we can absolutely help with you there.
Terrific. There's a lot of requests about a slide deck and so on. I forgot to mention in the beginning, you will all be receiving this recording of this webinar tomorrow in your inboxes. I've kept strictly to 1 hour. We've raced through a very dense webinar, a lot of information. We've got a lot of questions still out there that we haven't answered. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you, my colleagues Samantha and Jeff, for presenting and taking time of your day as well. Much appreciated. Everybody, stay safe, stay well, stay happy, enjoy the springtime, and see you on the next webinar, and happy exporting in the meantime. Thank you. Bye-bye.